How bad am I?
Let's go back just a tiny bit. You're pretty good, just so I get a wide shot. Yeah. Yeah, because they shouldn't even be attacked. Basically. What's your weight now? She's on just pull it towards you a little bit.
Just be right here. I'm just gonna be tight. I'll get white lights on your cell phone. I don't think we're showing something like this. That would have to go through my desk because we're very tight with the weeks. So they have all projects. I don't really know how it pans out. So I can ask those. Yeah. 2 kids, but I was just guy, all right? I wasn't excited. I wasn't wait for that they can be like. You just do that with that whole situation. I gotta wake up there. Yeah, like that. Supposed to land until 1:15. We have to be
Well, thank you.
I think.
All right, we're ready to go. Please, good evening, everybody, and thank you for being here. We've got a busy agenda, and but first I want to welcome this is Secretary Tanner's first meeting as our Commerce Secretary, and I just want to make that official in a way that I know that Liz has been really worked here previously with Commerce, so she's certainly familiar with the operation, but I also have been working with Liz over the last several years as Lieutenant Governor, now Governor, really working on behalf of the DBR and the directorship there. So I want to just welcome that and make that certainly official announcement. Welcome you here, Liz, and I look forward to working with you and as we have in the past. And we'll be racing around all the big United cities and towns together, meeting people who really want to make sure that this work that we're doing continues. So just a quick overview on some of the things since we've last met in terms of the momentum that Rhode Island has, and a good amount of that momentum, like the lowest unemployment rate that we've seen since recorded history, which is a really important factor, and we still have jobs left to fill, which is really encouraging. And that's based on Moody's indicators, and certainly this is not the time. This is the time to keep the momentum going, in a way that this board has had a great deal to do with that momentum. Developing it prior to me being governor, and then as I am acting as governor, to keep this momentum going in a way that's really strong. Mike Solomon's here as well, a new member, and welcome, Mike. I've known Mike for many years as well. He's a small business owner, and he was my go-to person, not only as lieutenant governor, but also governor in the city of Providence on economic issues. And he's really been so helpful to the business community. So it's really a pleasure to have you here, Mike. So thank you so much. So we have got the Rhode Island Rebounds program going. I think that people have been interested to know what's happened there. 2,300 grants have gone out, $11 million of funding. One of the first things that was able to be done with Liz has informed me that she was able to kind of even simplify that application even further, since she's been on board as the secretary. So and tonight we know that we have the Pawtucket's Tidewater project on the table, and that's going to be a great discussion. I'm looking forward to that. And with that, after I take a motion to approve the minutes, and I'll turn that over, then I'll turn the meeting over to our secretary.
So moved.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you for that. And a second on that, the minutes. You got a second? Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, motion, the minutes have been approved. And now I'd like to turn it over to Liz to consider proposal of the project through this Tidewater project. I think Jeff Miller is going to be one of our presenters, but I'll hand this over to Liz.
Governor, I just have to note that due to some recent developments, I need to recuse myself from further consideration of this matter.
All right, thank you, and thank you for making that clear, and we'll mark that down.
Thank you, Governor. Mike, you got it up there. I'm gonna stand this evening. Thank you, Governor. Good evening, board members. Good to see all of you. I look forward to getting to know you all more one-on-one. Thank you for your very kind remarks. As you mentioned, since the last board meeting, we formed a working group to address all the questions that you had that were made up of members of the governor's team, of the Commerce Corporation, of the Executive Office of Commerce, members from the city, as well as the development team, as well as labor, and a commercial lending expert who was part of the team. And we went straight to work getting all the questions from you that you were looking for and providing you with all of the answers. And we've made a lot of progress. Besides answering those questions, the governor has also charged me with making sure that whatever deal we did bring back to you had a lot of very strong taxpayer protections that we're going to get into momentarily. And so while we do have a short PowerPoint presentation, we'd like to walk through it and ask the staff that's already up there. And so Jeff and I will be providing the presentation. Okay, sorry. Okay, first slide. So this slide shows a recap and an update since the last meeting. I mentioned the working group already. The request before you today is to amend the prior TIF authorization to authorize $27 million of net bond proceeds to be directed towards the stadium project and its support of public infrastructure. Something that's important to note is that this is after the developer has increased their private investment by $20.5 million, and they also did some extensive value engineering. As a reminder, the city of Pawtucket has confirmed that it will contribute $10 million towards the project gap. Next slide, Matt. So as you know, today we're talking just about the stadium, so it's important to know that the stadium project can stand on its own, and I'm going to turn it over to Jeff to talk some more about this.
Thanks, Secretary. Last time we sat down here, the question we got multiple times was, does the stadium pay for itself? And we've received projections from Fortuitous that have been reviewed by our consultant, CSL. CSL is the premier sports and development consultant in the world. And according to CSL, the financial projections and assumptions underlying the underwriting of this, they said the bank loan and the underwriting appears to be slightly aggressive but achievable. CSL concluded that the ability to achieve these projections is enhanced by favorable market conditions relative to other USL markets. Stadium design and extensive experience of Fortuitous in the operating of similar USL teams is also very positive. It should also be done that there were 3 sets of eyes on these projections: ours, CSL's, and the bank who's underwriting the loan. So this wasn't done in a vacuum. And with that, I will turn it over to Liz.
Just to say that, I know a lot of the board members had asked about the rest of the project and how we will know that it will happen and what it will look like. There are some key taxpayer protections that we requested and that the developer has agreed to which we'll review in a later slide, but I want to share this now to say that it is clear that Fortuitous remains committed to the development of the project beyond the stadium. And so as a result of the governor and the working group and hearing the request from the governor and the board, the developer has committed to adding between 80 and 100 units of additional housing, which would include workforce and/or affordable housing in lieu of an originally planned office space. Jeff?
Yes, thanks. And pre-construction work will remain for phase 1 infrastructure, which commence following the approval by this board action utilizing the remaining $1.5 million that was originally allocated to the super TIF and what you'll be voting on today. At the administration's request, Fortuitous will continue to accelerate the design and entitlement process for this portion of the project. Next slide. Great, thank you. This chart or table shows comparable stadiums around the United States that have started in various years. I think what this shows is we stack up favorably with the comps. And interestingly enough, Fortuitous is investing the highest actual dollar amount nominally of any of these comparable stadiums. The state, on the other hand, will be contributing 28.7% of the financing for the stadium project, with a total public sector commitment of 36.8%, which is in the mid-range of the last 5 USL stadiums involving public-private partnerships, and it's below the average contribution of 44%. Secretary?
Next slide.
Can I ask one question? Where are these in our packet here? These slides?
Yes. Oh, the slides?
These are part of these are in the memo. That
Yes.
slide is.
The data is in our documents, not the actual slides.
Jeff, can I ask a question on this slide?
Sure.
Did you guys look at attendance for each of these new stadiums, which is obviously a key driver of the success or not of our project?
It's an excellent question. I wish our consultant was here to speak to that right now. We did look at that. I can't recall the outcomes of that, but I'll have to get back to you on that, Bernie.
I did look. I don't know how stale the data is, but of all these stadiums, only one of these stadiums has attendance that exceeds what our forecast is. So I'd love to know why they think we're going to hit our forecast numbers when Colorado Springs, Utah, San Antonio, and Hartford all have attendance numbers that are short of what we're projecting.
Just note also that many of these stadiums have fewer seats than we're proposing here.
But if you have fewer seats, then you prorate some of the dollars spent too, on these, correct?
Yes, because it's such a modest sample size there. The information is geographically varied as well as size and program varied.
And I'm not trying to. It's not really a gotcha. It's just such an important consideration when you look at the nature of the cash flows we're going to generate at this stadium. Attendance assumptions are, almost everything. And so it's just, I'd like to understand that better.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Don, sorry.
You said that the consultant is not here.
No, I beg your pardon, Mr. Rod. Jay Lenhart from CSL, so,
Good, okay.
Bernie, could you repose your question again?
Yeah, I mean, I would, not to get into the details too much now, because maybe you're going there, but I think in the forecast, we're forecasting about 7,600 fans for a regular season game in general admissions.
General admissions and premium.
That's and premium. I looked at the average attendance for USL championship level games, and it's about 4,000. So the question is, and then for these new stadiums, I looked at the attendance for each of these stadiums, and it looked like we're forecasting the second highest attendance level for any new stadium, including Hartford and these various markets. And so the question is why? Because if we're off by a couple thousand attendance, this model doesn't work.
Well, a couple of reasons. I think number one, I think it's the quality of the stadium. So when you look at the league as a whole, the vast majority were not playing in a state-of-the-art stadium. They're either in a market where they're playing in a baseball stadium or kind of a second or third tier stadium. So that plays into fan experience and demand. And so I think that factors into it a bit. I think you also need to take a look at the market dynamics here, the quality of the ownership group with their experience in operating professional sports teams, that experience with Phoenix Rising, who used to be, before they relocated to another area that's less favorable within the Phoenix area, or one of the top 3 teams, 4 teams in USL in terms of attendance. So I think a lot of those different factors play into not looking necessarily at the league average, but more of the opportunity here in this market.
I guess my response to that would be, I was comping off, these are all new stadiums. And, well, a related question is, what are your thoughts on competing with both the Revolution and Revolution 2 just up the street? How did you build that into your attendance assumptions?
Can I back up to your first question?
Yeah.
Related to the comp, I think 4 to 5 of the comps are in stadiums of 5,000 to 6,000 seats, so they're never going to get to, that impacts the average, nothing when you look at it all. That's important consideration there. Yes, we did kind of look at the overall competition in the marketplace.
Mm-hmm.
We looked at the ticket price assumptions. I think, on the high end, they're about 75% what the Revolution are. I think on 50 to 75%, depending on the ticket category. So it's a little bit different, I think, from Pop Talks, which was kind of geared towards family entertainment, keep the dollars low, major league teams pay the players' salaries. So we have a different expense structure here. And so we looked at the ticket prices. It seems reasonable compared to where the Revolution are. I think we would be competitive with them.
Oh, I beg your pardon. So this is Jay Lenhart from CSL. He's been our consultant on this since we started looking at this project in 2019, and has been an invaluable resource for us.
While we're on the slide, now to get that average of 44%, you excluded the zeros, right? So for zero, you didn't.
I just looked at the ones that involve the public-private partnerships as the one with the asterisks.
Okay, and the biggest one is Des Moines, Iowa. But
Correct.
that has recently been delayed because of cost issues.
Correct. So since the time of this report, I think it shows it at 84 million. I believe it is just a similar story to here, north of 100 million, and they're negotiating, just like here, the cost increase in the public-private participation. But that was the agreement as of a couple of months ago, when the current pricing there was at 84 million. Now it's north of 100 million. They're working through those details.
Tom?
So you said that the stadium, they've done significant value engineering out of the stadium from the proposal that came across here with a monster jumbotron that looks like ET landed there. That, we had stadium seating that was better than the Cardi brothers have down at their showroom here in Warwick. And, you had boat launches and piers and different things like that, and we significantly cut that down. Take that into account, because I say if we're gonna go big or go home, right?
that was a balancing act as we went through that process in order to ensure as we try to manage the cost with the escalation that they still kept an eye towards the fan experience, to be able to achieve the attendance levels that are in the projections and protect the revenue that plays into how much the team can go issue debt against the revenue. So it's kind of a balancing act of where we could cut without significantly impacting revenues or fan experience and then the business model side of things.
I understand that, but it's still one of the state of the art, because state of the art, right?
Right, next one. So we keep talking about the key taxpayer protections. We want to make sure we can go over those. So Commerce will require that no state payments for the stadium would flow prior to permanent certificate of occupancy. So let me be clear, I know this is sometimes confusing, but if the stadium is built, no taxpayer dollars will be spent on the stadium. So second, we have Commerce will require that the state would not be financially responsible for further cost escalations on the stadium. Third, before I turn it over to Jeff, is that Commerce will require that there is a 30-year commitment to field a USL Championship Division soccer team with repayment provisions if they depart during the 30-year commitment period.
Thanks, Secretary. Commerce will require profit sharing or repayment upon any capital event based upon modeling showing potential for the state to see a return on its investment, consistent with other precedents we've had with the corporation and some of our programs. Commerce will require that the proceeds of any debt financing be reinvested in the stadium or other limited purposes acceptable to the corporation for a period of 10 years. And finally, Commerce and the city each have mechanisms available to hold the developer accountable for developing the remainder of phase one, with benchmarks that have remedies for failure of the developer to timely meet such benchmarks. Next slide, please. So what are the benefits? First of all, this is an investment in an important urban community. It will boost Pawtucket's blossoming economic development efforts, capitalize on the investment of the new train station in Pawtucket and Central Falls, and activate the waterfront of Pawtucket. It remediates and revitalizes a long vacant and contaminated brownfield site. The property's been vacant since 1975. It is a brownfield site, so its highest and best use is not a multifamily deal, most likely, but instead a deal that can sit on a brownfield. We think this is the highest and best use. Finally, there's a significant amount of job creation, creating 474 direct construction jobs and 162 new ongoing direct jobs, which equals just about $1 billion worth of GDP to the state over a 30-year period of time. There is additional state tax revenue too. The economic impact analysis done by our friends CSL shows construction of 30-year operations will generate approximately $37 million of cumulative sales tax revenue to partially offset the investment we're going to be speaking about today. And finally, not only are we getting a professional team for the state of Pawtucket, this facility will provide year-round sports and entertainment opportunities for Rhode Island, providing opportunities for diverse populations. Secretary.
So what are we asking the board to vote on today? To amend the prior TIP authorization to authorize $27 million of net bond proceeds to be directed toward the stadium project and its support of public infrastructure, of which $25.5 million would be focused on the stadium project, consisting of a 10,000-seat soccer stadium, a public plaza associated with the stadium, 150 surface parking area spaces, and a partial public river walk adjacent to the stadium, as well as $1.5 million, which would be for pre-construction financing for the public infrastructure. This funding would help accelerate the development of the remainder of phase one. Therefore, we ask the board to approve the taxpayer protections that we previously just discussed and that are on the screen there now, that we won't repeat unless you want us to go through them all again. What questions do you all have?
I'm not sure I understand. What assures us that 1B will happen? I don't understand that part.
So we have the taxpayer protections for the stadium piece, but as far as this is about the stadium only, right? So while we have some financial penalties that we're looking at, or repayment provisions that we're trying to use to ensure that they meet certain deadlines, the city also has an agreement with the developer to make sure that they meet certain deadlines for development as well.
But there's no real, I mean, if it's set up as a separate LLC, or if the stadium doesn't, there's no, I don't understand how that's going to.
By the way, we are represented today representatives from the city today, represented by the mayor, and the ownership team over there, represented by Brett Johnson. I just want to point out that we're also approving $1.5 million worth of design dollars for the city of Pawtucket to do infrastructure work that would intended to get the project got started earlier, the phase 1B project started earlier.
I think one of the questions, Liz, you weren't here at the last meeting, but that we were really focused on was what's the estimate for the entire project? Because the feeling was this initially was an amenity, and the core economic driver was the residential, commercial, retail aspect of it. And the total package here is intended to fund all of it. And so now we're kind of doing the amenity first, and then we're going to do the development piece, or what we think is more core to the development piece later. And so what we asked for was, what is an estimate for, with all the inflation considerations, the total cost of 1A and 1B, and with that, what is the ballpark estimate of what the state would have to come up with to get that 1B done? And I don't think we got an answer to that, but is there any estimate?
There's no estimate at this time. Know also that the program is changing. We're changing the office to residential, so that's changing some of the pieces of the work. But we do not have an estimate yet on that project.
What about an estimate for what we're going to have to go back to the legislature for in terms of misalignments? 20 million or 100 million? Any idea?
We don't. The developer's not been able to provide us with an accurate estimate yet, because again, they've been focused on the stadium portion.
And they're changing the project to the point where they're moving the office space using more housing units, and we just don't have the information on that yet.
Do we know a time frame for getting it?
So they're doing their drawings right now, and their engineering and such. I'm going to defer to maybe the developer, but I think within the next, six months?
Yeah, happy to speak to that. So Dan Kroger, Director of Development.
Could you come on camera, please?
Thank you for your time.
Or not?
So we are in the process of getting our design team ramped up. We're working to restart design. We've already finished entitlements, other entitlements, master planning, zoning. So we are working on the design. We're going to work on the entitlement work. We think it'll take about 9 months for us to get designed and to be in a position where we have GMP bids that can adequately give you good, solid figures associated with that.
I just want to add that with the conversion to the office to housing, that they'll be looking at certain housing programs that were just approved in the General Assembly, of which the regulations are still being written. So we're not sure what those programs look like until we're working on this thing right now.
I'm curious to know, I'm glad you're converting the office space to additional housing, and what percentage will be workforce affordable housing?
So because we're waiting to see what these regulations look like, we're just not sure what those programs will look like to determine what would be required in order for them to qualify for the program that would be available.
I think since, it seems like we keep coming back to this question of, we know where the economic development benefit is, and it's not necessarily in the stadium, which we've known that all along. The question I really have is, when we actually can take a look at what this might actually be, do we have anything built into this conversation, into this negotiation that says, if this isn't really beneficial or as beneficial as we thought it would be, or it doesn't meet the requirements we think it should relative to providing economic development for the people of Pawtucket, can we go back to a more open process and see if we can find something better? From a state perspective.
The way we separate it out is this is stadium only, and then any change would have to be wholly separate, but we couldn't put
But
them
it's
together.
wholly, but it's wholly separate, still tied to we're still assuming that once we get something from them, we'll go with what we get. I'm not sure I'm comfortable with that, given that we're sitting here saying we have no idea what that's gonna look like.
And that's why the numbers we provided today show that the stadium can stand on its own.
I hear that, but what I'm really saying is, we understand that the stadium on its own provides little to no economic development benefit, and that's what we're here for. So I'm trying to understand, do we have any influence at all, or control or something, over when we get to the economic development part of this? Can we say, no, we know we've been talking to you now for 3 years, but this is not what we had in mind. I mean, I don't know if we have the ability to do that, but I mean, basically we're saying that we're kind of stuck with, we don't know what it's gonna be. And when it comes back to us, it could easily be something that we're not happy with. And where are we at that point?
The road we're going down is going to be very similar to what we've been shown in the past, with the exception of the office going to multifamily. So we have an idea of what they're going to produce and how much economic impact it's going to have. And the developer also knows that the main benefit to them is building out the multifamily and the mixed-use portion and using the stadium as an amenity. I can't imagine they're going to come back with something totally different than what we've all seen over the last many years, multiple years.
Well, just to reiterate too, so we had talked about these earlier, so the city does have an agreement with the developer where if they don't meet certain benchmarks, they do get to take the land back. And then we're also working with the developer on repayment provisions if they don't meet thresholds that we set up as well for benchmarks. So there is an obligation for them to make progress.
But Liz, if they haven't finished those, are the benchmarks finished and written agreed on?
That'll be part of the assembly.
But we're voting to do this and it's not agreed upon yet.
Something we're still working on.
As you said, that it could, that it stands standalone, it works. Well, it barely works. I mean, it is, in the words of the consultant, slightly aggressive but achievable. If I had $50 million, I wouldn't put $50 million in a deal that was slightly aggressive but achievable. I think that's powerless. Without, I think spending $40–50 million of state money on something that's achievable is interesting.
That's probably a good time to have the developer speak for the so.
Yeah, I'm happy to. So in terms of the program, just to note, we've spent considerable time. We have not, it's not like we're just starting on the balance of the project. We've spent 3 years moving the entitlements along. We have an approved master plan. We have approved zoning. We've done a lot of work. We've done a lot of design work. We've worked with all your agencies. We know what we want to do. We're working on that. We're saying that there's one change to the building program. We're thinking that we're going to change from commercial office. We know that housing is a dramatic need in this state right now. We plan to build more housing. So we know what we want to build. We just need some time to design, to bid, to get proper GMPs, so that we can bring that forward. But we're very committed to what we've already entitled to date. This is not a drawing board project. We've been working on this for 3 years to bring this to reality. So we're very much committed to it, and we're excited to immediately begin on that, which is what we're doing.
And the master plan that's approved is the housing as well. It's full development, not just the city.
Yeah, we have a master plan that was approved by the city of Kentucky, which is what we need to deliver, which has, right now, it has 435 housing units. It has about 60,000 square feet of retail, ground floor retail, in addition to the stadium. We're talking about, because of the need for housing in the state, we're talking about increasing that housing by 80 to 100 units to bring the housing up above 500 units. We're committed to it. We're working on it. We're going to design it. We're going to bid it, which is how we really get firm numbers. This market right now, it's difficult in estimating time to understand inflationary pricing. So we're going to get GMP bids. We're going to bring those forward. We're going to know exactly what the project costs.
But we did approve this a year and a half ago, and that part of the program really hasn't changed until this recent change from commercial to a thought. The frustrating part, I think, for this board is what have we been doing for a year and a half, but for the stadium, it looks like there's progress made in the stadium, but the rest of it is apparent nothing's been done, which if you look at the 30-year NPV for the stadium versus the rest of it, it's like $19 or $20 million for the stadium, and about double or triple that for the remaining. So it's imperative for us that the rest of this goes. So we just wish that that was a priority.
Same for us, Mike. June of last year, we came from this board with a phased approach, but the stadium was proceeding first. We've done everything that we said we were going to do. We brought the stadium to this point. Unfortunately, we got hit with completely unprecedented cost escalations. That's why we're here right now. We still plan to do what we said at that time, which is move forward with everything else. This board was aware of the phased approach that we took in June when we came to you. So we're still executing our plan. We're excited to keep moving forward with the entire project. That's what really is important to us as well. So I appreciate the comment.
I'm going to give a chance to speak.
Thank you, Secretary. Members of the board, just to piggyback or just to let you know what the developer is saying is certainly correct. The city of Pawtucket has signed a master development agreement with the city council that had to approve it after several months of negotiation. It was like around 8 months, if I wasn't mistaken. I know I look at my attorney here. And the city council is pretty much in the same position that you are, that the city really wants this whole project to work. And in the master development agreement, there is benchmarks, penalties, and also very strong language that ties the whole development all together. The city council, based on all of these developments, called me back as the commerce director back in July, based on everything that is happening here. And they even make a stronger statement that they would like the tax stabilization agreement to also be attached to the master development agreement, and for us to be able to go back to it. So I've been having conversations with the developer. We've been moving along the project, like Dan has stated. They already have the approved master plan and permits, and there is only a matter of resolve this issue for them to start moving forward for the next phase, which is part of the whole phase that we negotiated in that master development agreement. So for the city of Pawtucket, as you are as concerned, we wanted to make sure that that happened, and that was signed and executed in December of last year. So these benchmarks have been really tied to the whole project, including the housing and the retail space, and we want to make sure that we hold them accountable, because at the end of the day, that is what's best for Pawtucket, and we want to make sure this project happens as a whole.
I don't mean to sound like you.
Sure.
I love this agreement, by the way, but the dates in that master development agreement have been passed.
Not necessarily, and I love to have our attorney, like if you want to make sure, because you were the one that negotiated, that was before my time, I love to make sure that you could give the accurate information about the times.
Sure, so which dates were you speaking of? Dates, the schedule in the master development agreement.
So there, I don't think that's accurate by memory, and I don't have certainly all the dates memorized, but I'll just say to the prior question from Donna Sams about where do we go from here. The way that master development agreement is constructed, we define the project as a whole. And the project is everything that's been in the papers for 3 years. It's the whole kit and caboodle. So, and then at every level, so we go the big plan, which has already been approved by the city. We have preliminary phase plans, which would be preliminary designs. They'd be preliminary budget schedules. Those get submitted for review for consistency with the whole project, and then there's a conversation. What's before the board, and then that flows down to a definitive phase plan, which Dan was talking about, which is your GMP bids, everything you need to do to have in place to be able to say press go construction. So at any point in that process, if there's a breakdown in the consistency with the prior approved concept, that starts a negotiation and a conversation and a good faith effort from all the parties to come together and figure out a path forward that works. What's before the board today is an approval just of the stadium portion of that process. It doesn't in any way bind the board's hands relative to that later consideration of what gets put before the board or before any other state or public body as the project moves forward. So it's really about the stadium today. I'll note as well, and it's a good measure of the good faith investment from the development partners that we have in Fortuitous. If you look at those sites today compared to where they were 2 years ago, they are miles more developable today than they were before on the back of investment by the developer. If you look at the proposal today, that $1.5 million portion of that will get invested into making those sites more saleable, more developable. We know the developer is going to be the ones to bring that project to fruition. Costs have changed, so have the income assumptions. We don't have that information to consider today, but it's all in flux, and those two things move together. But the expectation is that if for whatever reason that didn't happen, the project and those sites are more saleable and more marketable and more developable today, and they will be more developable tomorrow than they were 2 years ago. So to answer your question, even if it's not this developer with this project, which we fully expect it will be, there's still better opportunities if this gets approved today than there were yesterday. So.
I also, this is Jean Harrington, W3D, Council for Fortuitous. The deadlines in the Master Development Agreement, I just happen to have them. It's 18 months for preliminary plans for all subphases, which will expire to June 30 of next year. Definitive phase plans are due to June 30 of 2024. And so we're still within those deadlines.
Thank you. As Mike noted, in here, there's several commentary made about being somewhat aggressive, but achievable. And I'm just concerned that we look into 2023, with the potential of recession coming along. How close are we going to be successful with that in the back of our minds? I'm hoping that you consider that aspect when we read this year. The other question is, I know Pawtucket has $10 million invested, and I'm assuming that you have approvals from your bond council to do what you're doing with the $10 million. Is that agreeable to that? Is that correct? Okay. And so Pawtucket is basically saying to us right now that you stand alone with that statement, you're quite comfortable. Yes. Am I correct? And I'm assuming that Jewish is doing the exact same thing. You guys are saying, we're happy to just do the stadium right now and move on from there. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
We will aggressively be moving forward the housing we were talking about.
Okay. I think, and it was noted by a few people, that this board was very much concerned about being able to support that stadium going forward. And is there a memo of understanding that the state will support some of this down the road, that we will work with Fortuitous to get this completed in the city of Pawtucket, or is that just left wide open?
I'll follow if I can with as what the director or the secretary said. We are looking at the housing dollars, we're looking at DOT, we're looking at getting all of this ready and making sure it's pad ready for the developer as much as we can. So yes, we have an understanding that we're working together to figure that out.
Do you have a written understanding between?
No written understanding.
So this is a handshake and say,
it's an understanding. We have to go through the process because the regulatory stuff isn't there yet.
It's a lot of money to do on a handshake.
David, in addition to the housing dollars, we're also talking to the Department of Transportation about some of their dollars as well.
I just think that the board has been very concerned about that aspect, and it would have been nice to have a detail how we were going to approach this for the phase one, the second phase. I think that was our main concern from day one. It wasn't the stadium, and we still don't have any of those answers.
Any questions?
Yeah, I'm going to go back to timing. So given that so much of that second stage is in flux, I'd just like to be clear in understanding what the downside of waiting is. I know you've talked about it before, but just to say that, if we were waiting for more clarity on what the financing would be for phase two, and we waited, for some of this new regulation, and just make sure we're clear what the downside is to that delay.
Yeah, I'm happy to do. I mean, there's a lot of downside. Obviously, we all know that interest rates are rising quickly. Inflation is still rising, so we're trying to lock in our GMP bids. We're looking on right now. Interest rates are projected to keep rising. We're trying to lock in our interest rates. The opportunity, we've spent a lot of money on this project. We were ready to go in April, and unfortunately, we got hit with an unprecedented thing that we never could forecast. So we're ready to go. We've started hiring employees. We're ready to launch the brand of this team, which we plan to do very shortly. This project is ready. We only have so much time to actually launch a professional team here in the state, but we won't have that right any longer. So that time is evaporating. We have a World Cup that's coming back to New England, coming back to the U.S. in 2026. We're already having conversations with FIFA about trying to bring the World Cup here to Rhode Island as a host city for millions of visitors that are going to come in 2026. The list goes on and on about the things we have worked tirelessly for the last 3 years to get to this time. For us to wait any longer, candidly, for all the reasons I stated, and some others that probably not coming to mind, it doesn't work. We need to press forward. We do plan to move forward with the multifamily asset phase 1B. We are moving forward with it immediately. We're working on design. We're spending a lot of money on this project. We're going to continue to spend a lot of money on this project to move that forward. So I ask the board to take this up. Time is certainly of the essence for us. We'd like to move this forward.
Just a related question to that. I don't think anyone questions the intent of doing phase B because you guys are raising a bunch of money and just the stadium doesn't work for anyone, right? It doesn't work for you. You wouldn't do the stadium without doing the second piece of it, I assume, because the returns won't work. And so the question is, what I think we're working through a little bit is, you get the stadium going, you raise a bunch of money, and the design, the cost of this phase B is so high that it requires $75 or $100 million from the state, and that's not there. It's not available to you. Then what? And that's the question we're struggling with. Then what? I think we're kind of hearing, well, then someone else will do it. But I don't know how that works because you can't do the stadium unless you know you're going to do phase B. It doesn't work economically.
If I could add something.
Yeah.
If we're not able to develop this site in the conditions that we have, I'll tell you, no one's developing anything in the state ever again. We have land at a discount. We have public infrastructure dollars that are going in to make this pad ready. If we're not going to be able to develop this, it's going to be hard for anybody to develop anything again in the state. So we are committed to making this happen. We believe that it is feasible to make it happen. We need to go through, we need to design, we need to permit, and we need to get GMP bids. We do think this project is feasible. We don't think we need $100 million to support. We think it's very feasible.
Yeah.
We think it's within the programs that are being drawn up right now if we need support. But we feel very good about the feasibility of the entire project.
Let me just say one more follow-up. Is there a viable project? None of us will decide if there's additional money available. That goes back to the legislature. So is there a viable project for 1B if someone told you, look, there's just very little or no money for 1B, you got to do it with private financing. Is there a project that you can envision that will satisfy the needs of everyone that makes this work?
We need to work through that. We need to see what the final numbers are. It's too early to say exactly, but yes, I'm sure there is a project that can be done.
Yeah, and again, logistically, we have to keep in mind the site. You cannot build all this at the same time. Forget about where the capital's coming from. There's a logistical issue relative to just trying to go vertical on this. And that's one of many reasons why last June, before all this, we talked about the phase approach, which you all were well aware of and which was approved. But again, just to go back to the time is of the essence. I can't emphasize it enough. We've been at this, I've been at this now for 4 years. I put a lot of my personal money into it with absolute pleasure. I have investors that put money into this. We cannot continue to kick down the can down the road and think that something's going to improve with anything, because it will not.
Additional questions or comments? Tom?
I have one question, Governor. We received this packet on Saturday, and to get up to speed with all the variables and all the things in this, is there any way we can go into an executive session, just have some dialogue to be able to have some deep questions that might be proprietary to gratuitous, or as well the mayor or the state?
Yes, the board's discretion.
So I make what do I say, Christopher?
Motion to enter into executive session pursuant to Rhode Island General Laws 4246 5A7 to consider proposed incentives.
Thank you.
You want to move?
Yes.
Second.
Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, roll call.
Roll call. Mr. Weisenstein.
Yes.
Mr. Bonanno.
Yeah.
Ms. Catucci. Mr. Schoenberg.
Yes.
Dr. Dan Messier.
Yes.
Ms. Kaplan. Mr. McNally.
Yes.
Mr. Neal.
Yes.
Ms. Sams.
Yes.
Mr. Solomon.
Yes.
Mr. Stone.
Abstain.
Ms. Salido Vickers.
Yes.
We're in the executive session, so we ask everybody to please vacate the room, and we'll lay
So folks, we're going into executive session, at which point we've been asked to leave the room. We'll pick this up when the meeting returns. Thanks all of you for watching. If you can, take a moment to like, follow, share our social media.